Hey everyone, and welcome back to Warriors of the Ancient World. Today, we're diving into the life of a man whose name has echoed through millennia, a symbol of rebellion against oppression, Spartacus. His story isn't just about bloody arena combat, it's a tale of leadership, defiance, and the desperate fight for freedom. So grab your gear, because we're heading back to the Roman Republic to uncover the legend of the gladiator who shook an empire to its very core. Most of what we know about Spartacus comes from a few Roman historians, like Plutarch and Appian. They weren't exactly his biggest fans, but even in their accounts, his incredible character shines through. They describe him as a Thracian, likely from a region in modern-day Bulgaria. What's fascinating is that they say he wasn't just a brute. He was intelligent, more Greek than Thracian, which in Roman eyes was a huge compliment. He might have even served in the Roman army as an auxiliary soldier before being sold into slavery. Imagine that, a man who once fought for Rome, destined to become its greatest internal threat. His journey into the gladiator pits began in Capua, at the infamous school, or ludus, of Lentulus Batiatus. Life here was brutal. Gladiators were property, tools for entertainment, their lives hanging by a thread for the amusement of the crowds. But Spartacus was different. He wasn't just a fighter, he was a leader. Inside those stone walls, he saw not just fellow slaves, but brothers in chains. He began to plant the seeds of an idea, a dangerous, unthinkable idea, freedom. In 73 BC, the plan was set. Around 70 gladiators, armed with nothing more than kitchen knives and whatever they could grab, fought their way out of the school. It was a desperate, bloody breakout. They weren't just fighting for their lives. They were fighting for a future they could call their own. Once free, they raided a wagon full of gladiatorial weapons and armor. Suddenly, they weren't just escaped slaves. They were a small, but lethal, rebel army. They made their way to the slopes of Mount Vesuvius, the very same volcano that would later bury Pompeii. This rugged terrain became their fortress. News of the escape spread like wildfire. Slaves from all over the countryside, drawn by the promise of freedom, flocked to join Spartacus. His small band of 70 grew into thousands. The group was a mix of different people, Gauls, Germans, Thracians, each with their own languages and customs. Leading them was no easy task. Spartacus shared command with two Gallic leaders, Crixus and Enemaus. They were a trio of seasoned fighters, united by a common cause. Rome, at first, completely underestimated them. They thought this was just a minor problem, a bit of local trouble. They sent a small force of about 3,000 men under the command of Gaius Claudius Glaber. Glaber didn't even bother to build a proper fortified camp. He simply blocked the only known path down Vesuvius, planning to starve the rebels out. He thought he had them trapped. He was wrong. This is where Spartacus's genius for tactics first became legendary. He had his men gather wild vines from the slopes of the mountain and weave them into strong, sturdy ladders. Then, under the cover of darkness, they did the impossible. They rappelled down a sheer cliff face on the other side of the mountain, completely bypassing the Roman blockade. They circled around and launched a surprise attack on the sleeping Roman camp. The result was a total rout. The Romans, caught completely off guard, were annihilated. The rebels not only won, but also captured a huge cache of proper Roman military equipment. This victory was a turning point. It announced to the world that Spartacus was not just a runaway slave. He was a brilliant military commander. With momentum on their side, the slave army grew exponentially, swelling to an estimated 70,000 people. This wasn't just an army anymore. It was a moving nation of freed people, including women and children. They spent the winter of 73 to 72 BC training, forging weapons, and organizing their forces. Spartacus knew they couldn't just be a disorganized mob. He instilled Roman-style discipline and tactics, turning former farmers and slaves into a cohesive fighting force. Their success continued. They defeated two more Roman legions sent against them. It seemed like they were unstoppable. At this point, the rebel army had a critical decision to make. What was their ultimate goal? Spartacus, it seems, wanted to lead his people north, over the Alps, and back to their homelands in Gaul and Thrace. He wanted to escape Italy and find true freedom. However, another faction, led by Crixus, had other ideas. Flush with victory, they wanted to stay in Italy, to march on Rome itself and plunder its riches. This disagreement tragically split their forces. Crixus took about 30,000 men and headed south, while Spartacus continued his march north. This division proved fatal. Crixus and his army were cornered and destroyed by the Roman legions. It was a brutal reminder of Rome's power. Spartacus, hearing the news, was said to have honored his fallen comrade in the most Roman way possible, by forcing 300 Roman prisoners to fight to the death as gladiators. It was a grim, poetic reversal of roles. Despite this loss, Spartacus continued his seemingly impossible march north. He clashed with the legions of the consuls, the highest elected officials in Rome, and he defeated them. He fought his way all the way to the foot of the Alps. Freedom was in sight. They had done it. They had beaten everything Rome had thrown at them and reached the gateway to the rest of Europe. But then, for reasons historians still debate to this day, Spartacus and his army turned back. Why? Did his followers, buoyed by their victories, refuse to leave the rich lands of Italy? Did they believe they could conquer Rome after all? Or did Spartacus believe that crossing the Alps with tens of thousands of people, including non-combatants, was simply too difficult? We'll likely never know for sure. But what we do know is that they turned south, marching back into the heart of the peninsula they had just fought so hard to escape. This decision sealed their fate. The Roman Senate, now in a full-blown panic, realized they needed a new kind of general to handle this crisis. They turned to one man, Marcus Licinius Crassus. Crassus was the wealthiest man in Rome, ambitious, ruthless, and desperate for military glory. He was given command of 8 legions, over 40,000 professional soldiers, and given one mission: crush Spartacus. Crassus was a different breed of commander. He was a master of discipline. When one of his legions faltered in battle against Spartacus, Crassus revived an ancient, brutal punishment: decimation. He had the cohort that broke ranks divided into groups of 10, and each group drew lots. The unlucky soldier who drew the short straw was then beaten to death by his own 9 comrades. This sent a terrifying message. It was more dangerous to retreat from Crassus than it was to face Spartacus. The tide began to turn. Crassus pursued Spartacus relentlessly, pinning the rebel army in the toe of Italy, in the region of Bruttium. Spartacus's plan was to cross the Strait of Messina into Sicily, a land with a long history of slave revolts, and reignite the rebellion there. He even paid pirates to ferry his army across. But the pirates took his money and sailed away, abandoning him. Trapped, Spartacus faced Crassus's masterstroke. The Roman general built a massive wall, a line of fortifications stretching over 35 miles, from one coast to the other, complete with a ditch and rampart. He had literally walled the rebels in, planning to starve them into submission. But once again, Spartacus showed his incredible resolve. On a single, stormy winter night, his army filled a section of the ditch with earth and wood, and a great number of them broke through Crassus's lines. It was another amazing feat, but their numbers were dwindling, and they were exhausted. The end came in 71 BC. The Roman general Pompey the Great was returning from Spain with his veteran legions, and another general, Lucullus, landed in southern Italy from the east. Spartacus was about to be caught between 3 Roman armies. He knew his only chance was to face Crassus in one final, decisive battle before the others arrived. The final battle of the Third Servile War was fought in Apulia. Plutarch gives us a haunting image of Spartacus in his final moments. Before the battle, he was brought his horse. He drew his sword and killed it, declaring that if he won, he would have many better horses, but if he lost, he wouldn't need one. He was going to win or die, fighting on foot alongside his men. He fought not like a general, but like a common soldier, trying to carve a path directly through the chaos to kill Crassus himself. He cut down 2 centurions in his path, but was eventually surrounded. Even wounded, they say he fought on one knee, holding his shield, until he was finally overwhelmed and cut down. His body was never identified. The rebellion was over. Crassus was merciless in his victory. He crucified 6,000 of the captured slaves along the Appian Way, the main road from Capua to Rome. The bodies were left for months as a gruesome warning to anyone who would dare to defy the power of Rome. Though he was defeated, Spartacus's legacy was just beginning. He became more than a man. He became a symbol. For 2,000 years, his name has been a rallying cry for the oppressed, an icon of the eternal struggle for freedom against overwhelming power. He was a slave and a gladiator who for 2 years held the greatest empire in the world at bay, not for glory or for gold, but for the simple, powerful idea that every person has the right to be free. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the life of one of history's most inspiring warriors. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next episode. Until next time, stay legendary.